As we remember JFK Jr.'s remarkable life and untimely death, we welcome Christopher Anderson back to Eyewitness News to talk about his latest book, The Good Son, which explores the unique connection between mother and son. Christopher, good morning. It's a pleasure to have you back on the show here.
Hi, Rob. Great to be back.
It's tragic when I think back to John F. Kennedy, especially being from the Cape Cod area. I can remember that July day in 1999 when his plane went down. Did John F. Kennedy Jr. have any political ambitions?
Absolutely, and it took him a long time to get around to it, you know. I think one of the greatest lines he ever came up with was, you know, people keep telling me I can be a great man, I'd rather be a good one. He spent his whole life really trying to deserve a political life and experience what other people experience. So finally, sadly, at the very end of his life, he had made the decision. He had his marriage in order, you know, everything was fine. He was going to start a family, by the way. He'd even picked out a name for the first child that he would have. Wanted to call the child Flynn because it worked for both a boy and a girl. But he was going to run for the Senate. He's going to run for the New York Senate seat, being vacated by Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Hillary Clinton wanted that seat. It was the seat that was to launch her career, but she was very afraid that John would throw his hat in the ring at the last minute, and indeed that's exactly what he planned to do. And he told his best friend, you know, I've lived here all my life, New York. She's a carpetbagger. She's never spent any time here. So wait till Hillary gets here. She'll have her head handed to her. I mean, he was going to play hardball.
That's interesting
because
because
I think the political landscape, yeah, it would be different.
Yeah, that's remarkable. I didn't realize that he actually had plans in motion to run for that Senate seat, and it's interesting because the Kennedys and Clintons were very close. Let's talk a little bit about what happened in July there. Now, he was running George magazine, his political magazine that sort of blended Hollywood and politics, and similar to a Vanity Fair with a political, sort of coming from a political angle. But he went and took off from an airport. He was about an hour late taking off, and about an hour later, tragically, he, his wife, and his wife's sister died right outside of Martha's Vineyard.
Astounding that they died within sight of Jackie's estate on Martha's Vineyard. The wreckage from the crash washed up on the beach there. Tragic. I think everybody remembers where they were when they heard the news.
Right.
Just like Diana's death 2 years before. Equally astounding is that it happened 15 years ago, and John would have been 54 this coming November, which is hard to imagine. So I thought it was the right time to really talk about that mother-son relationship.
Yeah, it's unbelievable that it's been so long now, too. You mentioned Princess Diana. Yeah. Now, Jackie wielded a lot of influence over John F. Kennedy Jr.'s affairs with public figures, Madonna, Sarah Jessica Parker, Daryl Hannah. Did he ever have an affair with Princess Diana?
He admired, you know, that we're not... I would say that they admired each other tremendously. They didn't know each other. They didn't have an affair, but I think that she was, you know, he talked about how beguiling she was, that the upward cast of her remarkable blue eyes is the way he described them. But, you know, she admired the way Jackie raised John. And she said that she hoped that William would, you know, be able to handle the press and the pressure as well as John had been handling it up until that point. And she said this just a few days before she died. So all of these coincidences are remarkably odd and eerie. Jackie also, I have to say, had a premonition, a nightmare that John was going to die at the controls of his own plane. So she made him promise during her lifetime that he not get his pilot's license. He did everything else, you know. He was a daredevil. He liked to play chicken in his kayak with the Staten Island Ferry, among other things. And that was okay with her. She liked his adventurous spirit. But she didn't want him flying a plane, and so he didn't until after she died. And
I think if I were part of the Kennedy family, I'd probably stay out of planes. Joe, Kick, Ethel's parents, and Teddy almost passed away in a plane in 1964 heading back to Massachusetts to accept the nomination. Was JFK Jr., who, like you said, was constantly in motion, was he a fatalist like his father? Why did he take all these extreme risks?
I don't think he was a fatalist. I think that somehow he was being protected, you know, by unseen forces. I don't think he thought ill would ever come to him. So there's a little hubris at work here. But a lot of this had to do with the fact that he had to constantly be in motion. He was a man in motion. He was, you know, we remember him rollerblading through the streets of New York and kayaking and swimming and working out. All of his friends said, "Why are you doing this constantly?" And he said, "Look, I'm afraid if I stop and think of everything that's happened to my family, of everything that's expected of me, I'll just sit down and fall apart."
Right.
So I've got to keep moving.
Christopher, we are tight on time. There are a lot of questions about the status of his marriage with Caroline Bessette at the time of that crash. I guess we'll never know. But final question, in your opinion, would JFK Jr. have ever run for the presidency?
I think he would have, and I think Jackie expected him to. She said, you know, one of the notes she left for him at the time of her death was, you know, you especially have a place in history. And I think she always felt that. But the important thing to her was first that he be, you know, the kind of man of character, and that he, in fact, I think became. Once again, if you ever met him, you realize that he was not like any other Kennedy. He was extremely grounded and just a regular, I mean, don't want to sound trite or cliche, but just a nice, nice guy. And that was because of his mom.